fifi lava te whaatalo whātu le nei fiafi le mai mo mai le po ia malmamalo lo tātou tunu. Ma lon so fu manuia ya malo foi le on sai fe au mga luenga sa fe ngai le yaso. Ya o le utatu to ai mai le o ngatu tonu le mai yaso le so lulu le nei ya o vasku pu sa fe ngai mala so malo lo le sa tama. Ya te whaatalo whātu ai I te mā umo lo tātou tunu, ya, mā lo I le whatua ai ngā tausi e pēo na whea ngai ma o tau te mā, o whau lungo ainga, o la fua mai maunga, o ngā lue mōle manuia, o whanau ma le ainga atoa, ya, mā lo lava I lo tu waso e pēo na sa whea ngai ai. Ai, o se whapoponga whapitoale nei o le tātou polokalame o Samoa I le so. O se polokalame toe wā ili ai, ma sila le roto ai inisi o tutupunga manuia, fia, maoa e tu mapu e po le ala le to nga whaingoa e whaingoa nai a o mele lei o tupu mai lo tatu tunu ai lo na hoi e poni me o whaile tonu ai mo o mia e to e whaile le fiafina nei tatu por kalame samo le so o mai mo mai o lo o ma la latu ma le te mai te nei o se te mai ta I mai le tusi tala o ia tusia se tusi e pei ona mai mo mai lo tatu tunu I le tusi o whaengoa ina Tautai. O le tala, o whamatala ina ai. Ia le soifua o le fionga ia Ta'isi O.F.Nelson. Ia, o se tasi o tai longa o le tātou tunu. Na tūla I mai I le vai tau o le mau. Po le teimilea, sapu lea I tātou e siamani, whātou solo mai a New Zealand. Ia ma matarona whanga solo mai. Ia le taimolo o fina watu mo se saulotonga o Samoa. Ia, taluaila ona le fiafine ia e le mawhai e le sunga le tamai taifu mai o na tala noa le tātou ngana. Ia le mele o le whātou teia le nei whātala tanuanga I le ngana Peritania. It's a pleasant good evening and welcome once again to this edition of our program for this evening. As you can see, I have here with me tonight in this edition of our current affairs program, I have here Dr. Patricia O'Brien, and she is the author of the book that we're about to launch sometimes this week, and the book is titled Tautai, and we all know what the real and the deeper meaning of the word Tautai is, and the book is the first biography of Ta'isi O.F.Nelson, who is one of the central figures in the history of Samoa and its passive resistance towards the colonial rule of the Germans when they were here, and also the New Zealanders. And before we start with the program this evening, I would like to take this opportunity on behalf of Honourable Joachim Kyle and also Verona Parker, who is the General Manager, to welcome you and thank you again, Doctor, for availing your time and to talk to us about this great work that we're about to celebrate. Welcome to our program.
Thank you, and thank you very much for having me here.
Ta'isi O.F.Nelson. He's a very important figure in Samoa, in Samoa's history. And we can never we can never leave out the Mau moment when we talk about, when there is a mention of his name. Mm-hmm. And besides that, there are also a lot of very important events in the history of this country. But we have seen that you have special interest in this man. What really motivated you? What really came into your mind when you first, about 5-6 years ago, when you first set out to write something? Why didn't you write about something else in Samoan history, but you decided to focus on this man?
Okay, yes, well, I had a project. I had to write about New Zealand's rule of Samoa. I arrived in New Zealand in 2012 to write about this topic, and I didn't have a very clear idea about how I was going to do that. But when I started reading files in the Archives New Zealand, I kept coming along these letters from New Zealand officials who were very upset about a man called Mr. Nelson. And I kept thinking, well, who is this Mr. Nelson? Why is everyone dedicating pages and pages and pages of letters complaining about him, criticising him? I thought, well, what did he do? And why, who is this person? Because I admit that I did not know. So this was in early 2012. And as I started, I mean, it was really literally about 2 weeks from discovering him in the archives to making contact with Ta'isi's family, because I had, in order to look, a librarian directed me to some letters of Ta'isi's, but I couldn't look at them without permission from the family. So through colleagues at Victoria University in Wellington, they put me in touch with Tui Atua, but it was really this one night when I met my colleague Tamasailau Sauli Sauni, and I was talking to her about all the things I'd found out about Mr. Nelson, and I was just talking to her and just going, he's extraordinary man, and why hasn't anybody written about him? And I'm talking to her and she's nodding at me very wisely. And that night I went home and I really, lay awake, and I had this, moment where it was like a lightning bolt struck me. I was like, I should write about him. I should write a biography of this man, but I cannot do that unless the family gives me approval. So the next morning I emailed Sailau back and I said, look, I couldn't sleep last night because I was thinking about this, and I would really like, if the family agrees, to write a biography of this man. And she said, well, I'm so glad you've said that because I've already been in touch with His Highness and he would like to meet you. And then the next thing, I was here in Apia and his family had given me permission to look at his letters. There's files of his that haven't been used by historians before. And it was from those files, those letters, that this whole story about this amazing man and his friendships, his networks, the extent of what he did just kept emerging. Everything I read, I just had these, extraordinary moments of just finding out more and more and more about him, and just realising what an important, and not just an important story for Samoa, but also for New Zealand history, also for world history, what an important person this man was and how important it was to tell his story. And the thing that really motivated me was what a passionate man he was. And so, he's been, this figure in my life since 2012, and it's such a great thing to be able to bring the book home, to Samoa, to bring Tautai home and share his story with the people of Samoa.
You first encountered him when you started reading the materials that you came by New Zealand. Mm-hmm. You wanted to look at the New Zealand rule of Samoa at the time. But then you repeatedly came across him through letters that were complaining about him. Mm-hmm. From that time, weren't you thinking that he was an agitator, or someone who was very, subordinate to his leaders and the colonial rule of the time?
Well, he was definitely branded a troublemaker, New Zealand's arch enemy. But that makes him all the more interesting. That's what made him fascinating to me, because I love people who cause trouble. And he caused trouble he had this conviction, and this is the basis of his story and really of the Mau struggle, is that he would not accept that Samoan people were less than European people, and that New Zealand had to rule Samoa in the way that they did. He never accepted that was the way things should be, and that's what the essential struggle was, that he didn't believe in racial superiority or racial inferiority, and that's what he was fighting against. And I wholeheartedly believe in what he did. And he had so much conviction and so much passion. And he was obviously such an interesting person. Had an amazing life and so many dimensions to his story as well. And so I was intrigued, and he still fascinates me because I'm sure there's things that will come to light about him that I don't yet know about. The interests that he had, and the things that he, there's bound to be other letters and things that he wrote that I haven't had access to yet. But he's really is a major figure in world history.
Ta'isi has made appearance in other histories, in other books written by some of the authors before. And there were also Samoan authors, historians, who have written about the history of the Pacific or Samoa, and there was also mention of Ta'isi. And what do you think is absent from what they? Because you said in the book that this body of work does not really represent him. Sometimes it presents him as someone who is not. What exactly do you mean?
Okay, well, I think the thing that I felt that was really missing in... I just want to say that the histories that were written before have been... historians never start from scratch. That's right. You're always building on someone else's work, and I fully acknowledge those works that have been written before. But what I felt was really missing from other histories was Ta'isi's voice. That people wrote about him, but no one actually had him speaking, that they weren't paying attention to the things that he wrote, the things that he said. He was being described, but he wasn't allowed a voice. So that's what I really tried to do with this book, is to quote him and what he wrote and what he said as much as possible, because he had an extraordinary gift for language, and he wrote beautifully. He had beautiful oratorical skills, and I just felt that the way that he presented his case, as he did over and over again about why things were wrong and why things had to be rectified. He did it. The way he expressed himself was just so eloquent and so beautiful, and so telling about who he was as a person. So that's something that I really felt was important, to have as much direct quotes from Ta'isi. So what was missing from previous works was that access to his letters, where he is expressing his personal views or explaining, what happened, what he was doing when the Black Saturday massacre happened, or his reaction to that, or how he personally experienced the persecution against him. That those things I felt were really important. Finding out his intimate worlds, his relationships with his daughters. He had 6 daughters who are very important figures in the book, but also his friends, the people who he worked with, because that's basically what he did, is try to establish an international network of supporters for the Mau, because it really was a global fight. It wasn't just fighting New Zealand authorities in Wellington. It was about British Empire. It was also about the League of Nations in Geneva. And so it really was a global fight. And he had all these amazing friendships with people, and very unlikely friendships too. But people, exploring those things, you sort of realise that he was a very personable man, a very warm man. He was very funny, very generous, and someone who really took his position as the head of his family very seriously. And he had a lot of responsibilities, and also being such a big businessman as well. It was very. He was a really, really was a central person in Samoan society, and he had plenty of opportunities to I mean, the New Zealanders wanted him to basically be their a political pawn and to come over and just, they were going to give him all kinds of inducements to come and, gain economic or political power if he gave up his Samoan relatives, friends, community, but he refused to do that, and so they punished him very severely for that.
He was a businessman. In fact, he was the wealthiest man in Samoa at the time, and he had good standing. He was seen within the Pacific context as a very well-to-do with all this wealth he had. Doesn't that, within your research and in the course of writing the book for 5 years, this man has been in your life for 5 years, or even more than 5 years. Doesn't that cement an accusation that was leveled against him as he saying that he was just a mad capitalist, just striving for commercial dominance in the country, given the changing of the guard from time to time?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that was certainly an accusation that he was only interested in the Mao for his own commercial gain, and that he was power hungry. And that is something which I really contest. Both of those accusations I really contest in the book, because there's no evidence that he was going to gain. I mean, this was the accusation New Zealand kept making against him, was that he was going to gain commercially or was gaining commercially from the Mao, but there's absolutely no evidence to support that. And New Zealand looked for evidence. They tried to find evidence. There was no evidence to support that. Also the accusation that he exploited his fellow Samoans. Again, there's no evidence to support that. But it's been...
And that he was naive. He didn't live to see what he was fighting for.
Yes. Well, that was the other... Yes, that he didn't achieve anything.
He didn't achieve anything.
Because he passed away in 1944 and... a lot of people sort of said, well, this was all for nothing. But it actually wasn't. He set... And this is the whole reason why the book was named Tautai, because I really felt like he was navigating the country. He was setting the country on a particular course. And, he wasn't there to see independence in 1962, but the point that I make in the book is that without the struggle and the sacrifices that he personally, his family, and all Samoans had to endure, that would not have happened. I mean, the reason why Samoa became the first independent country in the Pacific, is a lot to do with what he did. So all Samoans have inherited that legacy.
What did you have in mind when you were allowed to have access to the FU papers? Were you feeling that you have struck gold? Or?
Well, yes. I mean, but you never. That's the thing. When you're a historian, a lot of historians, you read through files after hundreds of people have read through files, and you try and pick something that's different from what someone else has looked at. But when I was looking at these, every time I open, and still, like the other day, I went back and I was looking at the documents again. They are so full of information. And every time I look at them, there's something else that strikes me about, how important those sources are. Because he wrote a lot. He wrote beautifully, which I always found it amazing that he only was at school till he was 13. I was like, well, what university did he go to?
He only went to Morris Brothers.
That's correct. Till he was 13. And then he was apprenticed to DHPG. But he kept learning. He kept reading. He kept self-improving. He was an absolute stickler for, correct grammar and spelling. And
where did you get that? Because I read in the book that there was this school report that you produced, and he did well. He did well in school.
He did very well in school. The German newspaper used to publish school results, and so that's how we know, because he appeared in the newspaper because he'd come first or second in some of these subjects, like English grammar and things like that. So he was...
And he was good in arithmetic.
And good in... Yes, he was very good at arithmetic. I mean, he had a very sharp brain. I mean, this is something which, people... It was very obvious to people that he was, from a very young age, a very ambitious but bold person as well. And that was something that, because these ideas about race were just considered to be scientific facts. These ideas that Europeans were better than everybody else. And so when he used to, even when he was a very young man, he used to speak out of turn and say things, when the Germans were ruling, he spoke out of turn, and he told the deputy administrator what he thought when there was the Mauapulai. And he let his feelings be known. But I was thinking, gosh, he was only in his 20s, or a young, probably just in his teens or 20s. But here he is talking.
You were also saying in the book, now we've got to this. You were also saying in the book that sometimes the company, the management, suspected that he was on the German side.
Yes, that question about his allegiance to Germany was has been a very potent part of the story, and previous histories have assumed that he was fluent in German, that he had these German connections.
Was he?
No, he wasn't, and he says that there is documents that are buried. Actually, it was a secret inquiry that New Zealand held in 1927. It was a closed inquiry. Ta'isi was the only witness. It went on for 10 days, and there were all these questions sort of fired at him about his life, and and the questions that the New Zealanders wanted to know was, are you allied with the Germans? And so he went back and he talked about his history with the Germans, with the DHPG and with the German government. And the thing about that source is that it was confidential, and then the report was buried. So it's actually very hard to find. And I do believe I was the first historian to actually read and use that source. But it's the best account of his youth that I've found. So this was in 1927, just before the Royal Commission into New Zealand's administration of Samoa. So it's a fascinating document that's been buried. And in that is all this information about his youth. So in that, he's explaining to the New Zealanders his relationship with the Germans. So he became an apprentice at age 13 to the DHPG. So, and he worked for them and, sort of learnt how they operated their business, and I guess gained a lot of really important knowledge about running a business. His father, of course, had started his own business a year after he migrated to Samoa in 1868. So Ta'isi worked for the DHPG, which of course was, a colossal company which was totally bound up with the German administration, and it spanned out across the Pacific to the other German colonies in New Guinea and Micronesia. So he was learning a lot of, business information, but he discusses in this inquiry that just a week or so after the Germans officially took over Samoa in 1900, that he was in Apia at a club and he got into a fight with some German naval personnel, which I think was, these were young guys in a drinking and dancing place. I strongly suspect it was a fight over women or something like that. But he got into a fight with these German naval officers, and he was arrested, and he had to go to court. And he explained that the officials at DHPG told him that if he was found guilty, he would lose his job. But he was like, well, I will do what's right. He felt it was unjust, so he took it to court, the German judge found against him and he lost his job. But in the course of discussing this, he also talked about how the Germans wanted him to learn fluent German. They wanted him to join the German Navy. But his father left it up to him to make the decision, and he said no, he didn't want to do it. The Germans didn't think he was German enough. They thought he was too British because he spoke English. So, you know, he's got this very multicultural influences because his father is Swedish. He was taught by French Maris brothers. He was very proficient in English, but then there was this German layer as well, which he was trying to resist. And so after he got fired from DHPG, he left Apia. He joined his family company. He went back to Safune, where he lived until I think it was about 1912 or something. You know, so he was sort of persona non grata with the Germans. So he went and sort of sat out the German rule over in Savai'i, and so that was again a very important time for him because he really became fascinated then and with Samoan mythology and culture, and he was fascinated with Polynesian mythology. I mean, that was something which endured in his life. So so it was a very important time. But yeah, he wasn't. So that accusation that he was like a German stooge cannot be based in fact.
Doctor, after spending 5 years of your life studying this man and Samoa, you're getting better at it. You're pronouncing the Samoan words better than other Palangis.
Oh, that's good.
Especially the word Savai'i.
Oh,
when you pronounce that word, you pronounce it like an European who's been living here for 20, 30 years.
Oh, good.
Anyway, by the way, after studying your research, is there part of your research that you haven't added into your work? And after studying this man for all these years, do you think you've come to understand him?
Well, you know, this is one of these things that people write about biographers, that they think that they have this sort of profound insight into people, that they know someone intimately or better than everybody else, that they can speak for that person, they know what that person will think. I have been very aware of the fact that that's not what I want to do. I don't feel, you know, I really am, I see this book as the first of many books that I hope will be written about this person.
Yes, because you're speaking like nobody else has talked about Ta'isi except for his own immediate family. But, you know, you have so much knowledge about him, and this is the first book of its kind, so, you know.
Well, I want there to be more. I mean, there is so much more to say about him, and I mean, this book could have been twice as long. I mean, the publisher was already upset with me that it was as long as it was. They wanted it to be shorter, but I couldn't make it any shorter because I kept finding parts of the story which I thought I have to include this in the book. So the thing is that what I really hope is that other people, young scholars, will, want to pick up other parts of this story and explore not just Ta'isi but the other figures in the Mao who were really who also haven't really been thoroughly researched. But the things like, just for instance, he wrote so much in Samoan, in the Samoan language, and that was something where I thought that is a whole lot of sources which a Samoan should be looking at. And so I really hope that people will pick up parts of this story and do their own work on Ta'isi, and find out new aspects about his life and what he did.
We will never get tired of listening to you, whether you talk about this book all day and tomorrow and the whole of this, we will never get tired. But because of time constraints, and I also understand that there will be other opportunities given to you, especially this evening. You will be at the National University of Samoa talking about the book. So we will leave it to, and also the launch, there's a couple of launches in Samoa, a private and a public one, and also New Zealand. So
Next
please,
Friday.
yes.
Next
so please,
Thursday,
Doctor, would you like to tell us about the other activities that will be involved while you're here?
Okay. So on Friday there will be a private family service at Tuaefu, Ta'isi's house. And that's the one that I'm most emotional about because it's, all the parts of the Ta'isi family and dignitaries coming and paying their respects at Ta'isi's grave. And there's been a number of members of the family who haven't been able to come back to Samoa for some time. Actually, the whole time I've been writing the book, they haven't been able to come back because they haven't been well, but they've made the journey for this, and that makes me very emotional because, that was like the big dream at the end was coming back to Tuaefu, which is where this research really started, where this person, this historical figure, began to become a human to me. Like a father, a husband, a matai. He became a real multi-dimensional person there. So to have that ceremony is something that makes me, really, really emotional. Because
you're looking forward to it?
I'm really looking forward to it. And then on Saturday, there's a public launch at the Tuiatua building at 10 a.m. And then on Monday afternoon at SSAB Bookshop. Book signing. And then on Thursday next week, we've got a launch in Auckland, and the former Prime Minister Helen Clark is going to review the book, as is Damon Salesa and Sir Michael Jones as well. So that's another really big event. So these are all, the beginning, I hope, of a whole lot of honouring of this man who is such an important figure for Samoa.
Before we end the program tonight, I am pretty sure that there are some people that you would like to thank.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, the people who I really want to thank are the Ta'isi family. Could not have started this book without them. I mean, a lot of historians think they can just start writing about someone or, without talking to the family, and for me, that was not something that I would even contemplate. This book had to be a collaboration, and it is. We exchanged a lot of information. We had a lot of debates. There's been thousands of emails, well, maybe not thousands, but hundreds of emails and texts and letters and discussions to sort of get this book into shape. So I really thank the Ta'isi family, and I thank my own family who have really... this book has been a big part of their lives too. We've had to live in 3 different cities while I wrote this book, which is hard on little kids, like lots of new schools and things like that.
The one who asked you that you wrote in the book.
Yes. When are you going to finish?
When are you going to finish this book?
Well, no. Well, when I started the book, he was like 3, and now he's, so he can't remember when I wasn't working on this book. So he's with me to launch the book. So it's an achievement for a lot of people, this book. And I have, there's Tamasailau, Sauli Sauni, who is, as I say in the acknowledgement, she's been the book's Tautai. She's helped me navigate through a whole lot of things. And there's a number of other people too who've been really important in putting this book together.
Who helped you with the book's name?
Well, now that's an interesting thing. That one thing that I kept thinking the whole way through the book was about Tuiatua's writings about the Indigenous reference. And I kept thinking I must put this in the book. And that was when I was finishing the book, I thought, I have to have the Indigenous reference there. And it sort of came to me, navigator. He was a navigator. And then a colleague of mine, Rachel Buchanan, who will be reviewing the book on Saturday at the launch at the Tuiatua building, She's Te Ataawa, and she's someone who was very important for finding these links between Ta'isi and Samoa Pomare, the Maori statesman, who they were very close friends. She said, you must have a Samoan name on the cover. That was, we had a meeting in Melbourne, and I thought, yes, of course. And so so there was all kinds of people who put ideas forward, and I'm so glad that because the book had other titles, like Mr. Nelson is the cause of all the trouble, Pacific Patriot, but Tautai is the right title because it is so evocative of who he was as a Samoan person, that the Polynesianness, the Samoanness of the story. I really wanted to make that the centre of this portrayal of this man, and I hope that comes through.
Oh, Doctor, there's hundreds more questions, but I think there's one last. I just want to ask this one last question. Somebody was just telling me before I came into this interview, someone who was able to read the book, and he said to me that after reading the book, it really enforced and it really strengthened his anti-New Zealand sentiments. Do you think your work has contributed to that?
I hope not, because the thing is that the book is not an anti-New Zealand tirade, and I know there's all this stuff about Australia and New Zealand, which has got very interesting in the last couple of days, but this is not this is not an attack on New Zealand. Australia has a brutal colonial past too.
Yes.
New Zealand did as well. Every, colonial settler country did. But what this book, I hope, shows are the New Zealanders who helped the cause. The cause could not have really got legs and moved forward without a whole lot of New Zealanders like Samoa Pomare, like Harry Holland, the Labour Party leader, and a whole lot of New Zealanders who are less unsung, who really helped the cause. And those are the people that I want to focus on. But of course, there are those New Zealanders, the villains in the story, if you like, the ones who were hardline colonials who who never saw a future where empire wouldn't exist, where white people didn't rule the rest of the world. And those people they're not exclusive to New Zealand. They were, throughout the British Empire and beyond. And the thing is that, and I end the book with Helen Clark's apology in 2002, which in the Ta'isi story is so important. That picture at the end of the book of Helen Clark standing in Tuaefu, it's an amazing moment when the history that Tuaefu had with, it was a place that was, raided and Ta'isi was exiled from there, but to have a New Zealand Prime Minister standing in that house, I think, is a really important moment in the book. And that's how, that these, and as Ta'isi said himself, Samoans will forgive, but they will never forget. And that's, so in short to your question, this is not an anti-New Zealand book. This is a book where, to silence that past, I think, is wrong. People need to know about it, need to deal with it, but it is in no way. This book would not have been possible without many, many, many New Zealanders working with me on this book.
Well, there you have it. Ladies and gentlemen, you have heard the author talking about the book, and as we have said before, and as it was on the news last night, and also sometimes last week, we have always talked about this book because this is the first biography this is the first author that has talked about one of the central figures of the time and one of the central figures of Samoa's struggle for freedom. And before we end the program tonight, let me take this opportunity to speak on behalf of the Managing Director, Honourable Joe Joachim Kyle, to thank you, especially for Dr. O'Brien, for taking your time out. Thank you for availing your time to talk to us. And we are privileged, we are honored for you being here. And there will be time that you will be acknowledged formally by our leaders and also the Ta'isi family for this great work, because you have produced a work that will be useful for all the generations to come in the future, our children and future generations of this country. Thank you very much for coming onto the program tonight.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Wa mai mo mai pa ia mal malo le tatu o tunu le nei fiafia pe on fa tala no inantu le tusitala lawi lore nei wo ia tusia le tusi mua o le tala o le soifu o le fionga ia Ta'isi O.F.Nelson ia o le mole si le fia o le fionga ia Ta'isi ia o lo na alo tama ita ia suafa ia no we ia o no we na ia fa na wina se tulo lo mutu malafi le fionga le tuia tua tupua tama se efi le sa abea malu tatu malo o no wingo le so tanga o le nei tai ia tai o le tatu tunu ele titi ai mole te mi mo fa to ai leo se tusitala o ma fai ona ia tusia se tusi e fa ta tau de soifua o le nei tai ia ai ta oto mai vo le tusi ele sina tusinga la melea si le o mo sa no tu ele te mai te tusitala o le afiafia na nei le National University of Samoa o le NUS o le afai ele sa unanga le tamai tai tusitala ia ma to fa ma mai ni se vaenga sa le te misa tu se tusi o mo na se atu lea mo le talanga ele a to tonu la vole a inga tu efu ile so farele aso to nai ia ona fai le sa ni tele o le tu ya tu le moto tu ya tu puta ma se efi e songi ia o inala la tala ilo le tunu a fi mai matala mai au le mai mo si le sila i le nei tusi fa unga na tatu po kalame le fiafi ma fa taitele le mai mo mai le pa ia mal malo le tatu tunu la mo si fa puponga i le polas flele ai mo le taimi nei fa tai ma lo le on sai mal mai mo mai to fa se fua